Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for y'all. So today is going to be a deck that I've seen requested quite a few times in the comments, so I figured I would get around to Branded Tearlaments once again. I'm playing a 60 card iteration of the deck because I think if you're going to be mashing these two archetypes together, both are already very graveyard dependent and like having their cards milled in general. So I think with so many, ways to benefit off of that, it just makes sense overall to play grass in this deck. And not only do I think it's because of grass that I think we should be going up to 60 cards for Branded Tearlaments, but kind of similar to Ad Emancipator, which we covered very recently. I think this deck has enough stuff that it wants to be playing that even factoring out milling a bunch of cards off grass, it's still optimal to play 60 just because there are, again, so many different things that want to be included in this deck. I try to think about trimming a deck like this down to 40, and it feels like a lot of what I'd be cutting is too essential to the deck. So, as you can see, we have fairly modest ratios here as far as the Tearlament and the branded cards go. Funnily enough, I actually kind of forgot Mirrorjade of all cards in my first iteration of this deck. Instead of Mirrorjade, what was I playing? It was, I think it might have been a second Guardian Chimera or something weird like that, but in any case, I was like, no, we definitely need Mirrorjade after I played my first game, went to make it, which we'll actually see that duel because it actually turned out pretty well, despite not having a Mirrorjade in my deck for that game. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that, but of course after that I was like, okay, let's get the Mirrorjade in here and actually get some real testing in. One thing I am doing that's a little bit different ratio-wise that I've been doing for some of my Bystial-based decks lately is rather than 3 Saronir, I guess specifically for decks that play Bystial Lubellion, normally decks that play this also wouldn't be playing 3 Saronir, but lately I've been trying 2 Saronir and 2 Baldrake instead of 3 Saronir, 1 Baldrake. I'm interested to try these ratios because there's been a lot of times playing not just this deck, but decks in general with 3 Saronir where I end up drawing multiple Saronir, and like more frequently than I would like to, because it's not really that great to have multiple of the same Bystial in hand. You want different ones because they're each once per turn. I also like the idea of having a second Baldrake for some more disruption, potentially. Of course, during the opponent's turn, the ability to banish their extra deck monsters for a fairly modest cost, and one in decks like this is fairly easy to fulfill, and can be even beneficial if you're sending off something. Actually, I don't know if it's, no, it tributes its cost, yeah, so it doesn't actually trigger something like a Merrli, but all the same, it's still really easy to pull off and is a very good disruption ability. So trying the 2 and 2 ratio for Baldrake and Saronir instead of 3 and 1. This deck also plays Branded and High Spirits, which you can play in both Tearlament and Branded if you want to, but you tend not to have room for this card more often than not in those decks. But in Branded Tearlaments, this card is great because it has a few different options of what it can grab for you. It can potentially send the roll close in order to get some tier plays. Like you can immediately send the other Tearlament monster and then fuse for a Kitt close because that will trigger off of the Branded High Spirits. You could also potentially send like a Cartesiz by revealing the Granganol and then get the Granganol effect as well. So, potentially the ability to grab back the Cartesiz as well. This can also search Cartesiz, of course, because it does add a Fallen of Albaz monster, not just Fallen of Albaz itself. So, yeah, it just has a few little ways that it can smooth out your draws and make some of your plays a little bit more consistent. Loving 3 Super Poly. I've been thinking about this, honestly, ever since the Synchro event, where I was playing the zombie deck that played 3 Super Poly, even though it wasn't terribly fusion-based deck, or it wasn't the Synchro event, it was the Legend Anthology event, that one. But Super Poly as a disruption tool in this meta is great. Like, honestly, all you really need in the extra deck is a Mudragon and a Garura, and Super Poly can act as both a board breaker and disruption tool against pretty much every meta-relevant deck. It can make Dragostapelia against a lot of different decks as well, even by using fusion monsters on their field, of course, with both Tearlaments and Branded running around quite a bit, and Branded Tearlaments as well, those all being very fusion-based decks. It's not easy to Dragostapelia summon one of these using Super Poly off of 2 of your opponent's monsters as well there. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty cool way that you can utilize this card. Again, not just infusion-based decks like this one, but I'm thinking of even trying it. I've also seen on, I've seen decks around on like Master Duel meta where people will be playing 3 Super Poly, even in a deck that's not inherently fusion-based, but just because they have the room for like Mudragon and Garura in their extra deck, so they're like, why not? And I don't think that's actually a terrible idea. It's obviously very deck-dependent, but long story short, Super Poly, extremely good right now. Very, very good card. Other than that, I don't think there's really anything else I need to go over. There are a lot of Ultras in this deck. I'm sure people are going to make comments about that because that tends to happen whenever you play a 60-card deck, though. If you're looking for some ones that you can trim, though, like you could get away with 1 Mercourier, but I do really like having 2. You can get away with like 2 Lubellion, but 3 is optimal. Fusion deployments, these are available in the structure deck, so don't forget that you can just get these by paying 1,500 gems. Tearlaments Scream, you could actually get away without even playing at all in this deck, frankly. It doesn't come up often that it'll actually search a Tearlament trap card, and you definitely have enough plays without it. So if you really wanted to, you could play without Scream at all. Super Poly, debatably, you could play without this. It's not needed, but it's extremely good, so I would definitely highly recommend it there. And unfortunately, the extra deck is pretty much all Ultras, and honestly, it's pretty much all required too. Again, unless you're not playing Super Poly, then you don't need Garura. But alright, now I think that's everything I wanted to talk about as far as the deck goes, so we're going to go ahead and break it down card by card, and then look at some gameplay. We're on 1 Despian Tragedy, 3 Maxx, 2 Tearlaments Merrli, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Tearlaments Havnis, 2 Fallen of Albaz, 2 Aluber, the Jester of Despia, 2 Tri-Brigade Mercourier, 1 Springans Kitt, 2 Tearlaments Scheiren, 2 Blazing Cartesiz the Virtuous, 1 Bystial Magnamhut, 2 Bystial Saronir, 1 Bystial Druiswarm, 2 Bystial Baldrake, 1 Albion the Shrouded Dragon, 1 Ad Libitum of Despia, 3 the Bystial Lubellion, 1 Foolish Burial, 2 that Grassless Screener, 3 Fusion Deployment, 2 Branded Fusion, 1 Primeval Planet to Perlerino, 1 Branded Lost, 1 Branded Regained, 2 Tearlaments Scream, 3 Super Poly, 2 Call by the Grave, 2 Branded Opening, 2 Branded High Spirits, 1 Branded in Red, 1 Branded Retribution, 1 Tearlaments Cryme, 1 Tearlaments Sulliek, and then 1 Branded Beast. There's our 60-card main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Mudragon of the Swamp, 1 Tearlaments Kicklos, 1 Garura Wings of Restorant Life, 1 Predaplant Dragos Tepelia, 2 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Despian Tragedy, 1 Mirrorjade the Iceblade Dragon, 1 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 1 Tearlaments Rolklos, 1 Granganol the Dusk Dragon, 1 Rindbrum the Striking Dragon, 1 Guardian Chimera, 1 Tearlaments Heart, and then 1 Despian Proskinian. That's going to do it for our list. Now let's look at some gameplay. Okay, our first opponent is going to be on Sword Soul. It looks like they're on like a dedicated going second Sword Soul strategy because they're playing Raigeki, Lightning Storm, Dark Ruler no more. That's actually not a terrible idea, honestly. I think of all the meta decks out there, Sword Soul is probably the one that can most get away with just jamming a bunch of dedicated going second cards and choosing to always go second. So, I'm going to start with the Branded Regained, followed by Branded in High Spirits. Here's one of the uses I was talking about for it. I'm going to pitch Scheiren and then also send Roll Close to add Cartesia. This will in turn allow me to fuse the Scheiren with the Roll Close using Scheiren's effect in order to grab a Kitt Close. Now, I get to successfully bait out the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring before I even activate the Branded Fusion here. So things definitely worked out very nicely here. I'm going to summon the Cartesia and then actually fuse with it with the Kitt Close in order to make Granganol. This will not only summon a Granganol, which will trigger its own effect, but also trigger the Kitt Close effect to mill 5. Again, I actually want to be doing a lot of things before the Branded Fusion here, just so I can see if my opponent has any disruption, because there is even a world where I could potentially like Nibiru, or get Nibiru before I even end up dropping the Branded Fusion, but I also misplayed a little bit here. I sent off the Albion with the Granganol, but if I was expecting the Branded Fusion to resolve, which I should have because the Ash Blossom was already activated, then I really should have sent Rindbrum in order to add a Mercourier during the end phase instead. It's not gonna super duper matter, but it would have been more optimal to do it that way. Gonna get an extra draw off this Branded Regained. It's a Tearlaments Havnis, which is a great extra draw to get. We then get to use the Lubellion to fuse, and oops, making a Masquerade here because this was in fact the duel where I forgot about Mirrorjade, and I actually do end up getting Nibiru. My opponent was very patient and did wait for an optimal moment here. This will allow me to trigger the Granganol effect, though, and drop a Despian Proskinian. So between that, a token that's got 10,000 attack points, branded in red, and Tearlaments Havnis, I'm actually not too concerned. Oh, and also my Proskinian, yeah. Even though I did have a Nibiru dropped on me here. Let's going to start by summoning a Sword Soul of Moye, revealing a Taya in order to do so. I'm going to go ahead and reveal the Havnis off that. Let's special and see what we end up milling here. It ends up being Maxx, Cryme, and Aluber. So unfortunately, nothing that's really going to do a whole lot here, but I am going to go ahead and use the Branded in red and fuse using the Havnis on board and 2 monsters in hand in order to make myself a Guardian Chimera. I did debate if I wanted to fuse with another monster on the field to destroy 2 things here, but I ultimately decided that I really only need to destroy 1, either Moye or the Sword Soul token. I'm going to blow up the Moye, because if my opponent's got a Long Yawn or something in hand, they could just summon that and then get another Sword Soul token and sync that one with Moye to make their level 8 anyway. Also, if they have the Sword Soul token on the field, they can't link summon. They're locked into only being able to synchro summon, which would prove very difficult. Of course, I still have the Proskinian, the Guardian Chimera, and the Nibiru token, all of which are actually stronger than the Nibiru that's on my opponent's board. So even though I did forget my Mirrorjade and definitely made an unoptimal board as a result, a board that got hit by Nibiru anyway, we were still able to pull out a win there. So that's very, very nice. We, of course, also even had the Mercourier and the Saronir and Super Poly for the next turn. I mean, we had, and Aluber for the next turn. We definitely had plays for days. It's definitely no denying that. But we have plenty more plays to see here in the next game. Let's go ahead and move on to that one. Alright, our next opponent is going to be on Tearlaments. No branded, just Tearlaments. It's a fairly standard looking Tearlaments build, playing a Diviner with the Baron. Looks like we are taking the first move this time around. Opening, and no, it's an alright hand. Definitely going to be starting with the Bystial Lubellion here. Seeing if I can grab myself a Magnamhut, which does end up resolving. So now I'm going to drop the Foolish Burial. Ultimately going to send the Despian Tragedy and use that to add myself an Aluber for some plays. Normal summoning the Aluber, and of course we're going to add none other than Branded Fusion because we don't have that in hand already. Activated Branded Fusion, and okay, opponent's got Maxx. It's not an Ash Blossom, so it does resolve. Opponent's going to get a couple of draws here, but not so many that I'm like concerned about it. I'm going to go ahead and make a Lubellion, setting up the Ad Libitum in the graveyard. This way I can set up the line to potentially make a Guardian Chimera during my opponent's turn. Also making use of the Mirrorjade I'm about to summon here. So Mirrorjade is hitting the board, and my opponent does get that extra draw there. We did send a Saronir, so I will send a Lubellion. Mirrorjade's going to banish the Aluber by sending the Albion, but unfortunately my opponent does have a Magnamhut to banish the Albion. So that's a bit of a yikes. I don't get to search anymore, and I also don't get to banish anything off of the Mirrorjade next turn. Opponent even had a Druiswarm during the end phase. Well, they searched, they searched it. Of course they had it, but they're going to make use of their Druiswarm during the end phase in order to make sure that my Ad Libitum gets banished as well. So gonna have to hope that this Super Poly is gonna be enough, although we do have the Magnamhut as well. And funnily enough, my opponent ended up conceding very, very early here after only activating the Beatrice to send a Kelbeck. So the reason I included this game anyway was to kind of drive home a point that I've always made about Tearlaments, and that's that you should never get it twisted if you know you're playing against another Tearlament deck, which, I mean, I don't know, I did summon the... This was the game I summoned Kiklos, right? Oh, no, it wasn't. So I guess my opponent didn't know for sure that I was on Tearlaments, but, I don't know. That actually was a bit of an early concede there. If I didn't reveal any single Tearlament cards, the point I was going to make is that my opponent conceded because they realized that, you know, by activating Kelbeck, that was only going to give me further plays, even though it does further their own game state as well. I'm definitely much further behind them at this point. I think either way, there were definitely much better things they could have sent off that Beatrice than just a Kelbeck if they're on Tearlaments. Maybe they didn't have another tier monster in hand, but at the same time as Virtuous is a monster or a card? It's any card, right? So you can always send Sulliek and add like a Reino-Heart. Yeah, they had normal summons, so they could always do that. I guess that misplay is why they ultimately conceded. I think I would have at least seen what the bills were before conceding. But either way, it was a bit of a misplay on my opponent's part, but I think it was also a misplay to concede just because you made a misplay. I think that duel was still pretty winnable from their position, but Anyway, let's just go ahead and move on to the next game here. Alright, our next opponent is going to be on Mathematic. It's a 50 card variant, which is definitely, that's a pretty chunky deck. I do think that, I was looking through their list, I do think my opponent does have some things they could trim, but all in all, it is ultimately their deck and their decision. So we're going to be taking the second turn here. I've got a Havnis for a little bit of disruption here. Going to have to hope that's going to be enough, although the rest of my hand is looking fairly solid as well. Especially playing against Mathematic, having access to the call by is pretty nice here. I'm going to try to have this when Circular activates, so my opponent has an Ash Blossom. Very, very annoying, because that means I don't get to summon or mill, so I'm going to have to keep that Havnis in hand, and that is, of course, going to be my only bit of disruption. Opponent's even got a triple tack to follow up. Looks like they're putting back the call by. Looks like they expect to be able to counter pretty much the rest of my board here, otherwise. Which should be fair if they get a hand rip, a disrupt, and a negate off the super factorial, as well as the negate off this effect failure here. That's not a terrible assumption for them to be making. Alright, so overlaying for Aluber here, I'm going to activate the Aluber effect, detaching both materials to add our diameter, of course. Then going to normal summon the diameter. Diameter effect will bring back the circular. Going to link these two off in order for Splash Mage. Is that what's happening here? Yeah, Splash Mage. Looks like we're not playing the Link Disciple or Devotee line here. I guess we could be. I just don't remember off the top of my head. But either way, we're going to be going for a Heat Soul line here. So we do still set up the Super Factorial here. Just doing it with a Heat Soul instead of like IP, Cyber's Wicked, and all that other stuff. So, because I'm the luckiest player in the world, I managed to top deck yet another call by, even though I'm playing a 60 card deck. So, rip opponent, I'm going to pitch Havnis to proc the Scheiren here, and fusion summon for the Kicklos. I'm doing this mainly just to bait out my opponent's Valor, so that way I can kind of Branded Fusion in peace. We did mill a Lubellion, which might come up later. Yep, there's the Valor coming down. That's going to ultimately negate the Kicklos and stop that from being a thing. Branded Fusion is happening now. Going to send the Albaz with a Cartesiz because I already have the Lubellion engraved. And going for an Albion here. Let's go ahead and activate Albion's effect. Opponent's going to chain Super Factorial. But unfortunately for them, I am just the greatest Yu-Gi-Oh player, and they concede immediately to the call by coming down, which honestly, I don't blame my opponent in the slightest. I would also be very salty if my 60 card opponent top decked the call by that I just put back with triple tech to counter the Super Factorial that I needed to resolve to even stand a chance. But All Might, if you're out there, I'm sorry. I am. That was some bad beats, me top decking just the same card there. But in any case, let's go ahead and take a look at this last duel here. Okay, our last duel is going to be against a 60 card sort of Ishizu Necroface Chaos Pile deck. It seems to be pretty reminiscent of the ones that would be played pre-Tearlaments when we had the Ishizu cards in Master Duel. That would aim to deck the opponent out. But of course, with Necroface at 2, that becomes much more difficult, if not impossible. I don't know if it's impossible or not, but it is going to be very much more difficult. So, opponent's going to start with a Scheiren mill. It's actually going to not only discard, but also mill a Snow. So my opponent does have 2 Fairy Tale Snow in the yard. Looks like we are then going to use the Diviner to bump its level up and then sync for the Baron, summoning a Chaos Creator. They are under Maxx here, although to be fair, my opponent's probably looking at the Maxx as a bit more of a blessing than a boon for them, as their goal is to deck me out here. So as soon as I kind of realized what was happening, I kind of realized it when I saw the Nemesis flag here, even though I don't think I've seen a Necroface actually hit the yard yet, have I? Not up to that point, although I do think one is in there now, if this Maxx would move. No, not just yet. But, in any case, yeah, I kind of figured that, like, yeah, there it is. I kind of figured that deck out was going to be my opponent's main sort of gimmick here. So, I was a little bit concerned, but at the same time, I also thought to myself, you know, if they don't deck me out, if they just don't, then I'm just going to win. Like, there's no way I can not win with this number of cards in hand versus whatever they end up spitting out. Like, it could be just about any number of negates, especially because I already have the Super Poly, but, like, as you can see, I've got the Perlerino, the Branded Fusion, branded in red, I've got Bystials, I've got Albaz, I've got Mercourier, I've got Cartesiz. Like, it doesn't even matter that Colossus is on the field and I can't search because I already have everything. Like, Alright, so opponent's going to try to activate Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep doesn't actually target, but I'm going to banish the Shanga just so that they don't try to get a full Armor Master out here. I do think that a Towers might be a bit more difficult to deal with, but to be fair, full Armor Master as a Towers, that's generally not too difficult to run over in battle, so I'd probably just end up doing that. Alright, Spray Elf is coming down. It is going to protect both Colossus and a Baron from being targeted. The Baron is going to end up negating the Druiswarm that's going to counter whatever elf, or attempt to counter whatever elf is trying to bring out here. Which is, the Diviner, that's right. Opponent's going to end up popping my Saronir as well. This is all ultimately fine with me because my opponent's now already used their Omni Negate. And it looks like they are just going to sync off their Colossus as well. I guess they figured that, you know, they didn't really need the, what is it called? The Search Prevention when I already have so many cards in hand. And interestingly enough, Protoss is not going to call Dark here, but Water. That's completely fine. Like, I might be on Tearlaments, but the only thing calling Water stops me from getting is, I believe, Rolkalos here. Which, or in Mudragon, which are both 100% okay. That is not an issue in the slightest. If my opponent had called Dark, that it would have definitely been more awkward, but I don't think it would have been impossible to play out of either. Alright, opponent is going to activate the Baron here. I'm going to just fire off this other Maxx in my hand, because why not? Looks like Baron is exchanging itself for Magnamhut. I guess my opponent wanted to get another search here, but it's not ultimately going to matter. I'm going to actually start with Fusion Deployment to summon the Albaz that's in my hand, and then I'll activate Albaz's effect to fuse itself with the Chengyang. And my opponent doesn't even really have the ability to counter that much, so Mirrorjade's already coming down. I still have Super Poly. My opponent concedes before I even really get a chance to fire it off here, so that's ultimately going to do it for that one, and going to do it for this video as well. Thank you for watching these games. I hope those of you who are requesting this deck enjoyed the duels here. Let's just move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.